In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That sentence fell into history like a heavy hammer, echoing so far that many generations no longer hear its reverberation. People read it quickly, read it out of habit, read it as if it were only a required opening line, like opening a door their hands have opened too many times before. But if we pause long enough, if we let those words touch the chest instead of sliding past the eyes, we can feel the enormous ambition hidden inside. A single sentence that dares to hold the whole universe, dares to lay the foundation for everything that exists, dares to say that before all we know, a will had already spoken. The story does not open with human beings. It does not open with a question. It does not open with doubt. It opens with an absolute declaration, no permission asked, no explanation, no evidence offered. It simply speaks and leaves it there. And because of that, it became a pillar for billions of people across thousands of years, people searching for meaning in a world full of chaos. When everything around them collapses, that sentence still stands there like an ancient rock, reminding us that this world is not an accident. But this story does not begin to tear down anyone's faith. It begins because there are people who have believed for too long without ever daring to ask. Not because their faith is weak, but because they were taught that questioning is dangerous, that doubt is betrayal, that thinking differently is standing on the side of darkness. And then generations grew up carrying sacred words in their hearts, but never daring to open them and see what they truly say inside. As we read on, we hear that the earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. That image feels deeply human. A world with no order yet, no names yet, no boundaries yet. It is exactly like the state inside a person who does not yet know who they are, does not yet know where they belong. And then a voice sounds in that darkness, "Let there be light." Not light made from something specific, simply light appearing because a word was spoken. Here, many people stop and feel comforted that as long as there is a word, darkness will fade. That light needs no conditions. But right here, too, others begin to feel a slight unsteadiness, like standing on a beautiful bridge without seeing the pillars beneath it. Light appears, but there is no sun yet. Day and night are named, but there is nothing yet to measure time. The story keeps moving with complete confidence, as if no one needs to ask a question. Genesis chapter 1 is written with a steady rhythm, almost hypnotic. Each day begins with a command. Each day ends with a judgment that everything is good. Order is built layer by layer, like a hymn sung in perfect timing, never missing a beat. For the reader with pure faith, this is beauty. For the reader with curious eyes, this is where questions begin to knock. Because if this story is the foundation for how we understand the world, then the way it is built matters. It does not describe a process witnessed by human eyes. It describes a memory beyond human capacity. No one was there to see it. Yet everything is told with absolute certainty. And that certainty has led many to believe it cannot be the work of humans. But that same certainty leads others to wonder, where does that certainty come from? There is something rarely spoken aloud. Genesis was not written in a shapeless void. It was written by specific people, living in a specific time, carrying specific understandings, fears, and longings inside them. They looked at the sky, looked at the earth, looked at the seas, and tried to tell a story large enough to explain it all. Not with telescopes, not with laboratories, but with language, with symbols, with faith. And perhaps right here, the story becomes far more intimate than what we were taught. It is not a voice falling down from heaven. It is a voice rising from within history, where human beings try to understand where they stand in a vast universe. Genesis does not only speak about how the world was created, it also speaks about what human beings want to believe about that world. When light is called good, when darkness is placed in its proper place, we see a deep longing, the longing that chaos is not the final word, that there is order, that there is meaning, but that longing does not automatically turn the story into an exact map of reality. It turns the story into a mirror reflecting the soul of those who wrote it and those who have read it for thousands of years. The opening of Genesis does not demand that we believe immediately. It asks us to pause, to look closely, to listen, and to ask ourselves what we are seeking when we read these ancient lines. Some seek certainty, some seek origins, some seek a reason to exist, and some, even if they do not dare to say it, are seeking the right to ask questions without being condemned. The story continues to flow day by day, word by word, but from the very first lines, the seed of every debate has already been planted, not because the text is weak, but because human beings have grown up. And when human beings grow up, they do not only want to be comforted, they want to understand. The story continues to flow with a steady rhythm, as if nothing could ever throw it off course. Light has been named, darkness has its place, and order begins to rise layer by layer. But when we turn to the next page, a strange feeling appears, very subtle, like hearing a familiar melody with one note slightly off. Not everyone notices it right away, because many have been taught that everything here is seamless, perfect, and comes from a single source. Yet the text itself does not know how to lie, and what it reveals sometimes needs no one to point it out. Genesis chapter 1 tells the story of the universe in the voice of someone who loves order. Everything is arranged neatly by day, by layer, by sequence from greater to smaller. It is a world created by words, and those words hold absolute power. But when we step into chapter 2, the atmosphere suddenly changes. The voice becomes closer, slower, like someone sitting down by a fire to tell an old memory, without drums, without rigid structure. Here, human beings appear earlier. Earth is shaped by hands. Breath is blown directly into nostrils. Plants have not yet grown. Rain has not yet fallen. And the world is still raw and unfinished. There are no numbered days. There is no repeated refrain that God saw that it was good. Instead, there are details that feel very real, very human. A man stands in the garden, alone, and the first thing acknowledged is not power, but loneliness. These two images sit side by side without explanation. There are no footnotes, no apologies, no attempts at reconciliation. They coexist, like two different memories of the same sacred thing. And it is precisely this parallel that has led many to begin asking, if this is a perfect account from an all-knowing being, why are there two tellings that do not match? In chapter 1, humanity is created last, as the peak of creation. Everything is ready. And then humans enter a completed world. But in chapter 2, humanity is the starting point. The world is built around them. Trees are planted for them to eat. Animals are formed so they will not be alone. Two perspectives, two orders, two stories about the place of humanity in the universe. One says humans are the result. The other says humans are the center. That difference is not a small detail. It touches how we understand ourselves. If we are the summit of cosmic order, we may believe everything exists for us. But if we are beings created in an unfinished world, we are forced to face responsibility, fragility, and the truth that we do not fully control everything. Two stories, two ways of living, held together in one book that many are taught has no contradictions. Later scholars called this the trace of multiple sources, not because they wanted to destroy the Bible, but because they read it as they would any other ancient text. They noticed differences in vocabulary, in style, in focus. One voice cares about ritual, about days and measures, about sacred order. Another voice cares about humans, about relationships, about soil and sweat. These two voices do not cancel each other out, but they also do not merge into one. For many believers, this is an uncomfortable moment, because if Genesis is not a single unified story, then what holds it together? If it is woven from many memories, which parts come directly from heaven and which rise up from the earth? Yet it is right here that the story becomes more real, because humans have never lived by only one voice. Our history has always been layers of many experiences, many understandings, many fears and hopes. Perhaps those who wrote Genesis did not see a contradiction the way we do today. They did not live in a world that demanded absolute precision. They lived in a world where stories shaped identity. Placing two traditions side by side was not a mistake, but a way to preserve the memory of many generations, without erasing anyone, without excluding anyone. Genesis became a space where many voices could speak, even if they did not fully agree. The problem only appeared when later generations tried to force that text into a single rigid frame. When they demanded it function like a science book, consistent like a report, that is when the gaps began to show. And instead of facing them, people often chose to cover them with silence. They called it mystery and hoped no one would dig deeper. But mystery is not a place to hide. It is a place to pause and admit that some things are not simple. Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 are not arguing with each other. They are whispering different questions. One question about cosmic order, one question about human identity. And perhaps the issue is not that they differ, but that they force the reader to choose how they want to understand the world. When these two stories exist together, they create a space that is tense yet alive. That space invites people to think, not just repeat, to believe, but still look, to love, but still ask. And it is within that tension that the story of Genesis begins to reveal its depth, not as a finished map, but as an invitation to step into a journey of searching for meaning. Light appears very early in this story. So early that it comes before everything humans later use to explain it. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That sentence has been read millions of times, in churches, in catechism classes, in quiet evenings before sleep. It sounds so familiar that many people no longer stop to ask what that light really was, where it came from, how it could exist when there was no sun, no moon, not a single star hung in the sky. In the rhythm of Genesis chapter 1, light needs no explanation. It appears because there is a spoken word. Day and night are named immediately after, as if the concept of time were already prepared before there was any tool to measure it. For ancient people, this did not feel disturbing. They did not live in a world of atomic clocks or planetary orbits. They lived in a world where words carried power, where naming something was also giving it a place in reality. But when humans began to understand light in a different way, when they learned that light is waves, particles, energy emitted from very specific sources, this story began to create a gap, not a gap of faith, but a gap of logic. Light without a source is like sound without vibration, like warmth without fire. Modern readers cannot help but feel this, even when they deeply want to believe. Some people say that this is divine light, not physical light, that it is the presence of God, the first order placed into chaos. This reading brings comfort to many, because it preserves the beauty of the story without directly facing contradiction. But right at that moment, another question quietly appears. If the initial light is symbolic, then why are day and night named as concrete realities? And if day and night are symbolic, then what in this story is not symbolic? Genesis offers no commentary. It does not say which parts should be read metaphorically and which must be read literally. It simply tells the story. And it is precisely this silence that places the burden on readers of every generation. Each person is forced to decide where they stand when reading these lines, standing in a world of symbols, or standing in a world of physical reality, standing with faith, or standing with reason, and many try to stand in both at once, even though that is never easy. Light is separated from darkness, and God calls the light day and the darkness night. A cycle is established very early, very firmly. But how does that cycle function when the earth has not yet begun to turn around the sun? When there is no center for all motion to revolve around? The story does not care about mechanism. It cares about meaning. That chaos has been divided. That things are no longer mixed together as before. The problem only appears when later humans try to use this story to explain how the universe operates. When Genesis is pulled out of its role as a spiritual declaration and placed on the witness stand of science, at that point, the light of the first day becomes a major question, not easily answered by faith alone, and not easily ignored if we remain honest with how we understand the world. Perhaps that is why this passage always makes people pause longer, not because it is confusing, but because it is so clear in its own way. It does not try to hide the absence of the sun. It does not attempt to rationalize. It simply tells the story the way ancient people imagined the beginning. A world where order comes before tools, where meaning comes before mechanism. If you have ever read this far and felt a slight inner tremor, a quiet unease you cannot quite name, you are not alone. Many people have stopped at the light of the first day and did not know how to continue. Some choose to believe and set the question aside. Some choose doubt and leave the story entirely. But others choose to remain in that tension, listening to it, to see what it wants to say about themselves. This story does not ask you to choose a side. It only invites you to stay longer with these ancient words, so they are no longer something you hear out of habit, but something you truly face. If while listening you have your own thoughts, your own questions, your own understanding different from what you were taught, do not keep it to yourself. Conversations like this only truly live when many voices speak together. And if you feel that you want to continue walking this path, not to be convinced, but to understand more deeply, then stay, listen more, and think together. The light of the first day does not explain everything. It opens a path. That path leads to the sky, to the earth, to plants, to human beings. But right from the beginning, it already reveals something very real. That stories about origins do not only speak about how the world was created, but also about how humans want to see that world. And light, whether physical or symbolic, always carries one unchanging function. It reveals what was previously hidden. When light has found its place, the story does not stop to rest. It continues moving toward the sky, where a new structure is raised between the waters. God says there must be a space to separate water from water, and that space is called the sky. In the language of the text, this is not just air, but a clear boundary, something firm, something that holds order in place so it does not collapse back into chaos. For ancient people, this image was easy to understand. They looked up and saw a solid blue sky, a place where rain fell from above, where the sun and the moon moved like objects attached to a vast dome. Above was water, below was also water, and humanity lived pressed between those two oceans, protected by an invisible yet very real barrier in the imagination. Genesis did not invent this image. It spoke the same language as the entire ancient world. But when humans began to fly, when they passed through the clouds, through the atmosphere, and saw the deep black space above, that image began to crack. There was no solid dome, There was no sea of water hanging overhead. There was only space, cold and vast beyond measure. And then the question appeared again, quietly, without challenge, but persistent. If the sky in Genesis reflects how ancient people understood the universe, then how many other parts of the story also carry the marks of that same worldview? Genesis does not try to hide this. It tells the universe exactly as people of that time imagined it. A three-layered world, water above, water below, and land in between. Order is held by boundaries, and boundaries are held by the power of sacred speech. No telescopes, no formulas, only story. And that story was strong enough to sustain the faith of an entire people. The problem only arises when the story is forced to become an exact description of physical reality. When people demand that it match what we know today about the atmosphere, about gravity, about the cosmos, at that point, the sky of Genesis can no longer stand. It becomes evidence that this text was not written to explain science, but to shape meaning. But what is that meaning? Why is the separation of waters so important? Why is the raising of a boundary told with such solemn weight? Perhaps because in the ancient world, chaos was always the greatest threat. Uncontrolled water meant floods, meant death, meant the erasure of life. God placing boundaries on the waters was not only an act of creation, but an act of protection. It declares that this world is not abandoned to chaos. Here, Genesis does not speak about the universe the way we understand it today. It speaks about human fear and hope. The fear that fragile order could collapse at any moment. The hope that there is a power behind everything, keeping the waters from overflowing, keeping chaos from swallowing life. The sky, in that sense, becomes a symbol of safety, of space for humans to breathe and exist. Yet when we read Genesis in the modern world, we cannot ignore the distance, not a distance between faith and science, but a distance between two ways of telling the same reality. One way rooted in direct experience and imagination, one way rooted in measurement and verification. Both are human creations, but they serve very different needs. Some try to close that distance by saying the sky in Genesis is not a solid dome, but simply an ancient way of describing the atmosphere. But that reading often forgets that the text itself is not vague. It speaks clearly of waters above and waters below. It speaks in images, not abstract concepts. Forcing it to fit modern scientific language sometimes takes away the honesty of the text itself. And then, once again, the question returns. If Genesis reflects how ancient people understood the world, then where does its value lie for people today? The answer is not found in whether it is scientifically right or wrong. It is found in showing that humans have always needed stories in order to live. Stories strong enough to say that the world has order, that chaos is not the final word, that life has a place among forces far greater than itself. The sky of Genesis may no longer exist in our scientific understanding, but the longing to be protected, to live in a world with clear boundaries, remains unchanged. And that is why this story does not disappear, even if it no longer fits how we describe the universe. It continues to live not as a map, but as a collective memory of how humans once saw the world when they were very small before nature. When the waters are separated, when the sky is named, the story moves one step further in the journey of building order. But at the same time, it also quietly reveals its limits. Not the limits of faith, but the limits of a way of understanding the world bound to the time in which it was born. And perhaps instead of denying that, we should face it directly, to better understand not only this text, but ourselves. Because every generation has its own sky. Every generation builds boundaries to keep the world from collapsing in their eyes. And those boundaries, whatever shape they take, always tell a deeply human story about fear, belief, and the longing to exist within order. When the sky has been set in place and the waters have been pushed into their proper positions, the story begins to turn downward toward the land. What was once only a wet and formless mass is now called forth to rise up, to become dry, and to stand firm. Land appears like a foundation, a surface where life can take hold. And right after that, plants begin to grow, green and abundant, heavy with promise. Everything happens very quickly, very neatly, as if life itself needs only a command to spring forth from nothingness. In this rhythm of storytelling, land and plants appear before there is any light from the sun. There is no sun to provide warmth, no cycle of photosynthesis to sustain life, yet plants still grow and multiply. For ancient people, this was not shocking. They did not know about cells, about energy, about chemical reactions taking place inside leaves. They simply saw plants rise from the soil, and soil called up from the waters. The story is told exactly according to what the human eye could witness. But for readers today, this is one of the moments that makes them pause longer, because plants are not things that can exist independently. They depend on light, on cycles, on a system far more complex than what Genesis describes. When plants are placed before the sun in the story, we do not only see a difference in sequence, we see a collision between two ways of understanding the world. One way rooted in direct experience, one way rooted in knowledge accumulated over centuries. Genesis does not try to explain how plants live. It is only concerned with affirming that life on land is not accidental. It is called forth, given the ability to reproduce and placed within a meaningful order. In the ancient world, having plants, having food, having seeds to sow was a matter of survival. This story tells its listeners that their source of life does not come only from sweat, but from an order far greater than themselves. But when we read it as a record of biological origins, questions begin to rise again, not to mock, but to understand. If plants appear before the sun, then what is this story really saying? Is it recounting physical history, or is it painting a theological picture, where life is placed at the center of the relationship between humans and God? Here, the goal is not to explain mechanism, but to affirm meaning. And then on the fourth day, the sun, the moon, and the stars finally appear. They are placed in the sky not to create light for the first time, but to govern the light that already exists, to divide day from night, to mark time, to serve as signs for seasons and festivals. This way of telling the story is completely reversed from what modern science says about the universe. According to science, stars are born before planets, and their remnants form rock, water, and life on Earth. But Genesis does not place the stars at the center. They are only great lights and small lights hung in the sky to serve the land and humanity. This is not naive ignorance, but a very clear statement of worldview. This world does not revolve around distant and massive celestial bodies. It revolves around the land where humans live, where plants grow, where life unfolds each day. In this picture, Earth is not a small planet in a vast universe. It is the main stage. The sun is not one star among billions of others. It is the source of light that regulates human life. The moon is not a satellite reflecting light. It is the lamp of the night, the companion of those who stay awake late, the keeper of time. When we read this today, we may call it geocentric thinking, but for ancient people, this was the only way the world could have meaning. A universe where humans have no central place is a cold universe, hard to live in, hard to trust. Genesis chooses a different way of telling the story. It places humans and their land at the center, not out of arrogance, but out of the need to belong. Yet this very way of telling the story is what causes such a strong collision with modern science. When we know that light from stars takes millions and billions of years to reach our eyes, the idea that they were created after Earth becomes difficult to accept. When we understand that the sun is one of countless stars, calling it a great lamp sounds both simple and strange. The distance between these two ways of seeing the world keeps growing. Some try to close that distance by saying that sequence does not matter, that this is only a symbolic framework. But if sequence does not matter, then why does the story emphasize each day, each step? Why does it tell the account so carefully, so deliberately? Perhaps because for ancient people, narrative order was the message itself. Placing land and plants before the sun was not a mistake, but a way of saying that life on earth does not depend on powers in the sky. Here, Genesis is doing something very bold in its ancient context. It lowers the status of celestial bodies, which many other cultures worshipped as gods. The sun is not a god. The moon is not a god. They are only created things, placed in their proper roles to serve the order established by God. This story was not written to persuade scientists of the 21st century. It was written to free ancient people from fear of the powers in the heavens. And when we look at it from that angle, we begin to understand why the story is told this way. It is not concerned with explaining how the universe operates. It is concerned with declaring that nothing in this universe is supreme except the one who called everything into being. Light, land, plants, sun, all stand side by side as creations, with no power of their own. But understanding this does not erase the tension modern readers feel, because we live in a world where science has become the primary language for describing reality. When Genesis is read as history or science, these conflicts cannot be avoided. And right here, the story forces us to ask what we are truly seeking when we open these pages of Scripture, a map of the universe or a story about the meaning of life. The story continues to flow day by day, layer by layer, but by this point, it is clear that Genesis is not only building the world, it is building a way of seeing the world. And that way of seeing, even if it no longer fits all of our knowledge today, still carries the very real imprint of people who once stood beneath that ancient sky, trying to understand who they were among land, water, and light. When the story moves into the 5th and 6th days, the familiar rhythm remains, but the focus clearly begins to shift. The world already has light, sky, dry land, and plants. Now it is time for moving life. The waters begin to swarm with living creatures. The sky fills with the sound of birds in flight. And then the land is called to bring forth animals, livestock, crawling creatures that move close to the ground. The telling is decisive, as if every form of life has simply been waiting for the right day to be named. Here, Genesis gathers the vast oceans into a single moment, gathers millions of different life forms into one spoken command. Fish and birds appear at the same time, as if they were two parallel branches of the same idea. For ancient people, this made sense. They saw fish in the water, birds in the sky, both moving in realms where humans could not live for long. They belonged to other domains, not the land, and so they were placed together in one day. But for readers today, that arrangement tells a very different story. Science tells us that fish appeared very early, while birds are descendants of creatures that lived on land long before. Birds carry within them the traces of dinosaurs, of hollow bones, of a process spanning hundreds of millions of years. Placing fish and birds side by side is not just simplification. It is an entirely different way of seeing the history of life. Genesis is not concerned with that long history. It does not speak of failed experiments of nature. It does not mention evolutionary dead ends. It does not tell of species that once dominated the planet and then vanished. Its story is a story of the present, of what humans see around them. Fish swim, birds fly, animals run, humans stand upright. The world is told in a way that serves to explain the role of humans, not to preserve every detail of biological past. When the sixth day arrives, the story slows slightly. Land animals are created first, then humans appear as the focal point. This is no longer a simple command, but a decision spoken aloud. Let us make humans in our image. That line sounds different from everything that came before. It carries deliberation, as if there is a pause, a moment of consideration before moving into something more significant. And this very line has become the center of countless beliefs, debates, pains, and prides of humanity. Humans are placed in a position unlike any other creature, not only because they have intelligence, but because they are said to bear the image of the Creator. Genesis does not explain what that image is. It leaves a space, and that space has been filled with countless interpretations for thousands of years. Some understand that image as reason, the ability to think and choose. Some understand it as morality, the capacity to distinguish right from wrong. Others understand it as authority, the right to name, the right to rule over other creatures. However it is understood, this story places humans on a raised platform, separating them from the rest of nature. And that separation has shaped how humans treat the world around them. But when science began to tell the story of humanity in a different way, that platform began to shake. Humans did not appear suddenly. They were not created complete in a single moment. They arrived very late in the history of life, carrying within them the traces of those who came before. Their bones tell stories. Their DNA tells stories. Those stories say that humans are part of the evolutionary flow, not an exception standing outside of it. Genesis does not know those stories. It cannot know them. It has no language for millions of years, for mutation, for natural selection. But not knowing does not mean it is meaningless. It only means it is answering a different question. Not the question of where humans come from biologically, but the question of what humans are in relationship to the sacred. The problem appears when those two questions are mixed together, when a theological answer is measured by scientific standards, and when a scientific answer is seen as a threat to faith. Then humans are pulled into a conflict they do not necessarily need to fight, a conflict between two ways of telling stories, when each way was born to serve a very different need. Genesis says that humans are given authority to rule. Science says that humans are one link in an ecosystem. These two views lead to very different ways of living. One can easily lead to exploitation, domination, placing oneself above everything else. The other forces humans to rethink their role, to realize that life does not revolve around them, but that they survive within a fragile network they do not fully control. The creation story of Genesis does not mention insects, does not mention bacteria, does not mention tiny organisms that determine the survival of the entire planet. It tells of what humans see as important, and that says far more about humans than about the world. What is included in the story and what is left out both reflect how humans understand value. When humans are created, Genesis says that everything is very good. It is a powerful conclusion, an exclamation point for the entire process of creation. But that conclusion does not account for the disasters to come, the extinctions, the suffering, the wars that humans themselves will cause. It sees the world at an ideal moment, before everything becomes complicated, before freedom and power come with consequences. Perhaps that is why this story both lifts humans up and places a burden upon them. If you believe you are created in the image of God, you cannot live as if everything is meaningless. But if you believe you are the center of everything, it becomes easy to forget that you are not the only owner of life. Genesis does not resolve that tension. It simply places it within the heart of the story, for each generation to face in its own way. When the sixth day comes to an end, the world has taken on its full shape. But the questions have not. They are only beginning. And from here, the story is no longer only about how the world was created. It begins to touch how humans will live in that world, with all the beliefs, illusions, and responsibilities they carry with them. When everything has been placed in its proper position, the story pauses in a very strange moment, not because there is nothing left to create, but because the work is said to be complete. The seventh day appears without a command, without a new creation, only with rest. In a world that has just been born, the idea of rest sounds both gentle and puzzling. Who needs rest when there is no exhaustion? Who needs to stop when everything is still untouched? But the seventh day does not speak about God being tired. It speaks about rhythm. 6 days of work, 1 day of stopping. A pattern carved into the very structure of time itself. For ancient people, this was not only a story about the universe, but a foundation for how to live. Rest was not a luxury, it was part of sacred order. And humans, if they wished to live in alignment with that order, had to learn how to stop. Here, Genesis does something very special. It brings humans into the story not only as created beings, but as participants in the rhythm of the Creator. The day of rest becomes a sign of relationship, a reminder that humans are not machines, not tools made only for production. They were created to live, to breathe, to remember that the world does not depend entirely on their effort. But when viewed from the perspective of history and science, the seventh day opens another question. If the 6 days before it are not days in the way we understand them, then what is the seventh day? If the entire sequence of creation is symbolic, then rest must also carry symbolic meaning. And if so, then what is Genesis really talking about, if not physical time? Some say that this entire story was written to explain why the Jewish people observe the Sabbath, that the universe was told according to the rhythm of law, rather than law being derived from the universe. The world was arranged to mirror the structure of community life, not the other way around. Genesis, in that sense, is a social story, not only a cosmic one. If that is true, then the order of creation is not meant to teach astronomy or biology. It is meant to teach limits. 6 days of work are enough. The seventh day must be set apart for stopping, for remembering, for placing oneself in a position without control. In an ancient world where people could easily be consumed by labor and survival, this message carried immense liberating power. But when Genesis is read as literal history, the seventh day becomes part of a difficult equation. If the 6 days of creation are 6 24-hour days, then the day of rest must also be a 24-hour day. And if so, the entire story must fit into a literal week. This way of reading has led to long-lasting conflicts with science. When the age of the earth and the universe cannot be compressed into such a short span of time, many try to resolve this by saying that God exists outside of time, so his days are not like human days. But if that is accepted, then the entire system of days in Genesis begins to lose its concreteness. And when that concreteness fades, the question returns to its starting point. Are we reading a historical record or a symbolic structure designed to convey meaning? The seventh day is not closed with the phrase about evening and morning like the days before it. This detail is often overlooked, but it is deeply significant. As if the day of rest has no ending, as if it continues, spilling over into human life, an invitation to step into ongoing rest, not only on one fixed day, but in a way of living. Genesis does not say that God rested because he was exhausted. It says that he rested because the work was complete. Rest, in this sense, is a declaration that nothing more needs to be done for value to exist. This idea stands in sharp contrast to the modern world, where value is often tied to productivity, efficiency, and constant forward motion. When we read the seventh day within the context of the entire creation story, it feels like an opening bracket into a different kind of space. A space where humans are allowed to do nothing and still be considered as living rightly. No need to create, no need to conquer, no need to prove, just to be present. For many people, this is no less difficult to accept than the scientific tensions within Genesis. Because if the world was created not only to function, but to rest, then the entire way we organize our lives must be re-examined. Genesis, in this sense, does not only raise questions about the origin of the universe, it raises questions about the value of human beings in a world that constantly pushes for more, faster, stronger. And then the story closes its first chapter with a very deep silence. No more commands. No more new creations, only time continuing to move forward, carrying the rhythm that has been established. But within that silence, the greatest questions remain. Not questions about how long the world took to be created, but questions about how humans will live within that world. After the seventh day, the story does not truly end. It simply changes form. What is told in Genesis chapter 1 continues to be carried forward as a background frame, a way of understanding the world that has taken deep root in the human mind. But as humans continue to observe, measure, and record, those frames begin to be tested, not by malice, but by an unquenchable curiosity. When people look at rocks, at bones, at the night sky, another story slowly emerges. Slower, longer, and without a clear beginning like a single week. Rocks tell their story in their own way, layers of sediment stacked upon one another, each layer a trace of a different age. They do not speak with words, but they speak with patience. They say that this land has gone through changes lasting millions of years, that seas once covered what are now mountains, that life arrived, changed, disappeared, and arrived again in new forms. This story does not have the steady rhythm of Genesis. It is messy, broken, and offers no promise of a beautiful ending. Then the sky begins to speak as well. Light from the stars does not arrive instantly. It travels across vast distances, taking thousands, millions, even billions of years to reach the eyes of the observer. When humans understand this, they realize that looking at the sky is also looking back into the past. The stars they see may have died long ago. The universe is not a stage built only for Earth. It is larger, older, and far colder than imagined. These discoveries are not aimed at Genesis, but they collide directly with the way Genesis has often been understood, not how the text speaks for itself, but how people have forced it to speak. When science begins telling its story, some feel as if the foundation is shaking, not because they hate truth, but because they fear losing meaning. If the world was not created in a week, if humans are not the center, then does life still have value? It is within that fear that attempts at reconciliation begin to appear. Some say that 6 days are not 6 days, but 6 long eras. Some say the order does not matter. It is only a literary framework. Some say God created the world with the appearance of age, as a test of faith. Each explanation tries to preserve something familiar, while avoiding something difficult to accept. But these efforts also reveal another truth, that Genesis itself does not demand to be read scientifically. Humans placed that demand upon it. Genesis was written in a world that did not separate poetry, history, and theology the way we do today. For ancient people, a story could be true in a sacred sense without needing to be mechanically precise. Truth did not lie in detail, but in the meaning being conveyed. When this is understood, a new question appears. If Genesis is not meant to teach how the universe operates, then what is it teaching? Perhaps it is saying that this world is not meaningless chaos, that even though humans are small, they are not lost, that there is an order, not necessarily a physical order, but a value-based order, an order that says life is good, that light is worth naming, that rest is as sacred as work. But this question does not make the tension disappear, because many people have been raised to believe that if Genesis is not correct in every detail, then it is not correct at all. A black and white reading, where everything must stand or fall together. And when science presents evidence that cannot be ignored, they are forced to choose. Either hold on to the text and reject the world, or accept the world and leave the text behind. Some have chosen to leave, not because they hate Genesis, but because they feel deceived. They were taught that this was absolute history. When they discovered contradictions, they felt as though the foundation of their faith had betrayed them. But others chose to stay, not by closing their eyes, but by reading again, reading more slowly, reading with the awareness that this text comes from another age, with different questions. In this way of reading, Genesis does not compete with science. It stands alongside it. Science speaks about mechanism. Genesis speaks about meaning. Science speaks about process. Genesis speaks about purpose. The two ways of telling do not need to exclude each other, unless humans force them to. The problem is not in the text, but in the expectations we place upon it. But accepting this requires humility. It requires humans to admit that their ancestors did not know everything, that they told stories using the tools they had. And it also requires modern humans to admit that, despite knowing much, they still have not answered the deepest questions. Science can say where we come from, but it does not say how we should live. Genesis steps into that space, not with data, but with images and story. When the tension between Genesis and science is seen this way, it is no longer a battle that must be won or lost. It becomes a dialogue. One voice reminds humans that they are part of a vast universe, not its center. The other reminds humans that even though they are small, they still have value, still carry responsibility, still need to live with meaning. These two voices, when heard rightly, can enrich one another. But this only happens when humans are willing to let go of the need for absolute certainty, when they accept that an ancient story does not need to carry the weight of all modern knowledge. When they allow Genesis to be itself, instead of forcing it to become something it was never written to be, then the text can breathe again, no longer suffocated between two extremes. This part of the journey is not comfortable. It forces humans to stand in the middle, with no place to hide. They cannot hide behind blind faith, nor behind cold skepticism. It invites a more mature reading, where questions are not enemies of faith, but signs of a faith that is growing. Genesis chapter 1, when placed alongside science, is no longer a closed declaration. It becomes an open beginning, an invitation to think, a challenge for every generation. How will you read this story in the world you are living in? And that answer, whatever it may be, will say as much about you as it does about the ancient text itself. When we look more deeply into the context in which Genesis was written, one thing gradually becomes clear. This story was not born in isolated emptiness. It was told among great civilizations, where surrounding peoples also had their own stories about how the world began. Babylon, Egypt, Assyria, each had myths about primal chaos, about original waters, about order established through divine power. Genesis does not stand outside that stream. It steps into the dialogue using familiar language, but with a very different message. In other ancient stories, the gods often fight, kill, and tear chaos apart to create the world. Humans are made to serve, to labor in place of weary gods. But Genesis tells a story with no divine warfare, no bloodshed, no chaos defeated through violence. There is only speech, and the world takes shape, a God who does not need to prove power through enemies, because no one stands equal to him. This mattered deeply to a small people living among powerful empires. Genesis is not only a story about the universe. It is a declaration of identity. It says the world is not ruled by unstable, chaotic forces, but by an ordered will. It says humans were not created to be slaves of the gods, but to live in relationship with the Creator. It redefines power, not through weapons, but through story. When Genesis is understood in this light, many details once seen as errors begin to carry different meaning. Calling the sun and the moon simply the greater light and the lesser light is not naive. It is intentional demotion. In a world where celestial bodies were worshipped as gods, Genesis gives them ordinary names. They do not rule, they serve. They do not decide human fate, they only mark time. Even the idea that humans are created in the image of God carries strong cultural resistance. In many ancient civilizations, only kings were believed to bear the image of the divine. Ordinary people had no sacred worth. Genesis shatters that structure. It says every human being, regardless of status, carries that image. This was a dangerous idea because it granted dignity to those without power. But precisely because Genesis was born in this cultural dialogue, it bears the marks of its time. It uses familiar images, familiar structures, familiar ways of telling. It does not try to be unique by denying everything around it. It chooses instead to transform what already exists, turning it in a different direction, and this is why it feels both familiar and strange to those who compare it carefully. Problems arise when Genesis is removed from this context and placed on a pedestal, as if it fell straight from heaven, untouched by history, untouched by human hands. Then every similarity to other myths becomes a threat. But when Genesis is returned to the ancient world, those similarities do not weaken it. They reveal the skill of those who told this story, people who knew how to use the language of their time to say something new. Genesis, in this sense, is not a copy of other myths. It is a conversation with them. It borrows images, but changes their meaning. It keeps structure, but transforms the message. It does not deny chaos, but says chaos does not have the final word. It does not deny power, but places that power in the hands of a being unlike any god the ancient world had known. When we read Genesis without seeing this dialogue, we tend to fall into two extremes. Either we sanctify the text so completely that we deny all historical traces, or we dismiss it as an outdated myth with no remaining value. Both readings miss what matters most, that Genesis is a human product, but one in which humans are trying to speak about something beyond themselves. And it is this tension that gives the text its life. Those who wrote Genesis were not trying to write a science book. They were not competing with other myths in terms of detail. They were answering a very specific question. In a world filled with gods, violence, and power, who do we believe stands behind everything? Their answer is etched into every line, every sequence, every narrative choice. Seen this way, the internal tensions of Genesis are no longer just logical problems. They become traces of a process of editing, remembering, and preserving collective memory. Multiple voices are kept. Multiple traditions are placed side by side, not to create a perfect system, but to preserve the depth of human experience. Genesis does not try to hide this diversity. It is later generations who tried to force it into a single mold. And when that mold cracked under the weight of science and history, many people felt lost. But perhaps that confusion is not a sign of collapse. It is a sign of growth, where faith no longer rests on simplicity, but on deeper understanding. Reading Genesis as a cultural dialogue does not strip it of its sacredness. Instead, it reveals the courage of people who dared to tell a different story in a sea of dominant narratives. A story that says order does not come from violence, that dignity does not belong only to kings, that this world, no matter how chaotic, can still be called good. And when we place ourselves in the position of those ancient people, standing among vast empires, without military power, without political influence, we begin to understand why this story was told the way it was. It was not a scientific lecture. It was a declaration of survival, a way to hold on to identity in a world always ready to swallow the small. Genesis chapter 1, seen from this perspective, is no longer a text that must be defended against every question. It becomes an invitation to dialogue, not only with science, but with the entire history of human thought. And when we accept that invitation, we learn not only something about the world, but something very deep about how humans have always tried, and will always try, to tell the story of themselves. When the story reaches this point, there is not much left to be created, but there is still much to be faced. Genesis chapter 1 does not close with a complete explanation, but with a world that has been named, arranged, and handed back to humanity. And right here, the greatest question no longer points upward to the sky, but turns toward the reader. When we stand before an ancient story like this, what are we really seeking? Absolute certainty, or a truth deep enough to live with? For many centuries, Genesis has been pulled in two opposite directions. One side turns it into precise history down to every detail, where any difference is seen as a threat. The other side pushes it into the corner of myth, where everything is considered outdated and without value. But both ways of reading miss the core. Genesis was not written to satisfy the modern world's need for certainty, nor was it written to be discarded when knowledge changes. It was written to answer questions that science, no matter how powerful, does not directly answer. Genesis does not tell us which equations govern the universe. It tells us that this universe is not meaningless. It does not tell us how many stages life passed through to form. It tells us that life is worthy of being called good. It does not tell us how humans appeared biologically. It tells us that humans carry dignity, not because they are strong, but because they are named within a relationship with the sacred. When science tells its story, it does so through data, evidence, and verification. Genesis tells its story through symbols, rhythm, and meaning. These two ways of telling do not need to exclude each other. They stand on two different levels of human experience. One level speaks about how the world works. One level speaks about how humans live in that world without losing themselves. The problem arises when humans demand that Genesis do what it never promised to do, when they force it to explain light, sky, plants, stars in the language of physics and biology. At that point, the story is bent, and contradictions become unavoidable. But if we allow Genesis to return to its original role, many controversies begin to soften, not because they are solved, but because they no longer need to be solved in that way. Genesis chapter 1 is not a closed answer. It is an opening, a beginning. It presents a world where order can be imagined, where chaos does not have the final word, where humans are not accidents. And from that beginning, every generation is invited to continue the story through how they live, how they treat one another, and how they see the world around them. When we read Genesis in the light of history, science, and culture, we do not weaken it. We make it more honest. We acknowledge that it comes from human hands, but that does not strip it of depth. On the contrary, the fact that it carries the marks of its time makes it more relatable. It shows that humans have always needed stories larger than themselves to orient their lives, to face fear, to nurture hope. Genesis does not ask us to return to the ancient world and believe as ancient people did. It invites us to learn how to read as mature humans, able to ask questions without fear, able to believe without closing our eyes. A faith that does not need to deny science, an understanding that does not need to mock the sacred. Between these two extremes, there is a quiet space where humans can pause and listen. Perhaps after reading Genesis this way, some people will feel relieved. There is no longer pressure to defend every detail. There is no longer fear that a new scientific discovery will collapse all belief. But others may feel empty, because simple certainty is gone. And in that emptiness, a deeper question is born. If the world is not handed to us as a complete map, then what is our responsibility? Genesis chapter 1 ends with God resting, but the human story does not stop. Humans continue to live in that world, carrying stories, beliefs, and different ways of understanding. Some use Genesis to dominate, some use it to liberate, some use it to build, some use it to exclude. The text does not control how it is used. That responsibility belongs to the reader. And perhaps that is the most important thing to consider. A story strong enough to last thousands of years does not survive because it has no cracks, but because it always creates dialogue. Genesis has endured not because it avoided every question, but because it could bear them. It has been reread, argued over, interpreted, misused, and rediscovered again and again. And each time, it reflects something about the age that is reading it. When the first light is named in that story, it does not only shine on the world being told, but also on the one who is listening. It reveals what we fear, what we believe, and what we still have not dared to say out loud. Perhaps that is the deepest function of Genesis, not to explain the universe, but to illuminate the human heart. The story closes here, not like a door shutting, but like a pause for the reader to ask what they will carry with them after leaving these pages. Certainty or humility, fear or curiosity, a rigid belief or a journey that continues to seek. Genesis does not force an answer. It only asks the question and leaves humans to walk forward with it.
Grateful that you chose to spend these moments in the light of this story. If it touched your soul, please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so the next whisper of light may find its way back to you.